lightning bolt, lightning bolt.
No, can you
lightning
stop
bolt.
using that GIF? And also, can you shut the up?
Hey everyone, welcome to GameGorgon. My name's Indigo.
And I'm Crew.
And today we're going to be going over Pathfinder 2nd Edition playtest, spellcasting.
Yep, the big old pile of complicated, just gobbledygook. We're gonna go through a lot of the fundamentals of spellcasting. Some of this you may have heard in a previous video, like the wizard or the sorcerer, the bard. Some of it you definitely have not heard in any of our previous videos. There's a lot of stuff in here that we're not gonna go over because there's so many different conditions, so many different stuff like that. But we'll be releasing more videos and going into other mechanics a little more in depth as we go on. So the first thing you have to understand is that there are different kinds of casters. There are 2.5 types of casters in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. The first type of caster is a prepared caster. At the beginning of their preparation phase, which happens after you finish a long rest, they get to select the spells they're going to be casting for that day. That means that not only do they have to select the spell, but they have to select the spell's level. If they know a spell, for example, Magic Missile, they can choose to prepare it at any spell slot that they have available to them. Not just the one that is default for the spell or the lowest possible level for that spell, which is called heightening the spell.
And spellcasters for that are like cleric, druid, wizard.
Yep. Keep in mind, as a prepared caster, if you want to be able to cast a spell more than once per day, you have to specifically prepare it in multiple spell slots.
Then there is spontaneous casters. They don't actually have to decide what spells they're going to cast that day until the moment they decide that they're casting it. This comes with a caveat, which is that their list of known spells are significantly smaller than all other casters. With the spontaneous caster, if they know Magic Missile and they want to cast it at a higher level, they actually have to have it as a known heightened spell. But here's the thing, they don't necessarily have to know it at its lowest level. They can add it to their repertoire at any point.
I mean, at the very least, the rulebook never said that as far as I can tell.
And I think it makes sense. Like, you don't necessarily want a specific lower level spell because it's not useful at lower levels, but once you get to a high level, it makes sense. At each level, you actually get to change out some of your spells. So if the lower level spells aren't working out for you, you can then turn around and take them at a higher level or just add more higher level spells.
It's just to kind of prevent you from getting cornered. If you don't have a lot of spells and you pick a really specific niche, but then it ends up not being useful, this is a good way to counteract that.
A good example of them would be a sorcerer.
Yes. The half a caster is the innate caster. Prepared casters and spontaneous casters can both have innate casting abilities, but it doesn't have to be a base caster that has innate casting. You can have a fighter with innate casting through feat, for example.
Or an ancestry, right?
Or an ancestry or an item. That's the crux of innate casting, is that the source of the magic isn't the class, it's something else. Now that we understand the casters and kind of how they work, let's talk about spells. There are 2.5 kinds of spell that we need to talk about, and the first of those is a normal spell. That's really easy because we kind of just talked about it. The spell casting rules for preparing and like getting the spells to use obey what we just discussed. But there's another kind of spell.
Cantrips. I love cantrips. Because
in this edition specifically.
Originally cantrips, when they started, they were actually called 0-level spells. And they actually had a limit to how often you could cast them. It basically made like a wizard or a sorcerer or any like spell casting specific class super weak in any sort of combat that was of any length.
Out. You could not just run out of like really powerful magic, you could run out of magic.
Exactly. Period. And so you're a wizard where you're like, well, I'm using my crossbow. With the cantrips in 2nd edition, you're actually able to cast them an unlimited number of times. That's really beneficial, and it prevents you from losing out, because it's like a fighter can always swing a sword. The benefit of cantrips on top of that is the fact that they're always cast at the highest level it can cast at.
Specifically, the highest spell level of the class that gave you the cantrip. So you can't heighten a druid spell if you're, have spellcasting level 1 in druid to the spellcasting level 5 you have in sorcerer. If you aren't actually a spellcaster and you have cantrips either via a feat or some other ability, you actually consider it as high as your level divided by 2. Rounded up. And now the category that counts as half a category, powers. Powers aren't spells. Why are they in the spell list? F you. Don't ask questions. They're in the spell list. Let's move on. Powers aren't learned the same way that the rest of the spells in the spell list are learned. They are learned from class features mostly, like feats. Specifically, a good example for this, I mean a good example for me because it's the class I play as often as humanly possible. The monk has powers that they can pick from. For example, there's one power that they have that I forgot the name of, which is very embarrassing for me. So powers, you can get them as casters, but you're not gonna pick them when you're picking new spells. Like cantrips, powers are automatically heightened. Unlike cantrips, they can have a minimum spell level requirement or other requirements.
Now, within spellcasting, there are 4 main categorizations of spellcasting, which are arcane,
Divine,
occult,
primal.
Now, there are also 12 kind of subcategories within arcane that are called schools of magic. We went over that in the wizard video, which you can go ahead and go check out so you can get more information about that.
Do we feel bad about plugging our own content? No. Get out of here with that. Watch all of our content. Okay, so now we know the different kinds of casters and different kinds of spells. How do we actually cast spells? Spells have variable casting requirements, and generally the spell that you're going to cast is going to spell out, Generally the spell you're going to cast is going to explain to you how to cast it, but there are certain parts of a spell that are pretty consistent. Specifically, the different kinds of casting. There's verbal casting, somatic casting, and material casting. And knowing all 3 of those different things is really, really important as a caster because it affects when you can and cannot cast certain spells. So a spell will tell you which of those components it needs in order to be cast. And then if you have the ability to meet those requirements, you can cast that spell.
With materials, when you cast it, it means that it requires some sort of physical item, whether it be, butter, or sand. I think it's like 1,000 golden diamonds.
Yeah. Generally, if a spell has a material requirement that costs gold, you have to give that gold up at some point. Now, that's going to be a conversation between you and your DM. The way Indigo and I like to run things is that if you have the gold, you can just assume that you bought it. Because having to prep for each spell, especially at higher levels when you have access to these spells that cost so much money, just kind of bogs the game down.
I do this with rangers and I do this with casters where every so many sessions, I'll just be like, subtract 5 gold. Your arrows as a ranger, and your material components as a caster.
Yeah.
And then you have to worry about bulk and weight and stuff like that.
And the butter melting.
If you have your material component bag stolen, or if you have some reason why you can't get access to your materials, and that will probably go along with how the story is going or what the DM is saying.
Like if you're tied up or something.
Exactly. You can't cast that spell.
Exactly. Next is somatic casting. Somatic casting just requires you to do really silly looking stuff like that. Similarly to material casting, somatic casting can't be used if you're bound, or if you're stunned, or if you're paralyzed. Basically, if you can't move your body, specifically your hands, you can't use somatic casting.
Verbal, well, I think that's kind of obvious. You're using your mouth. You're speaking the magical words. If you can't speak, you can't cast the spell. Lightning bolt.
Spells have a lot of different properties, most of which aren't consistent. Some of them have ranges, some of them have durations, some of them have, radiuses and like conal shapes and stuff like that. The spell's going to explain those things to you in its text. There's one thing that you should understand though about spells that doesn't apply to every spell, but is a very in-depth mechanic that I think is important to explain, and that's concentration. If a spell has a duration of concentration, its duration is until the end of your next turn, unless you spend an action to concentrate on that spell and use it to extend the duration 1 turn further.
Gotcha.
So you can use the concentration action multiple times to concentrate on multiple spells.
And it's not like you can spend 2 actions on 1 turn concentrating to extend it by 2. It's
right, you can target 2 different spells.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's probably impossible because most spells take 2 actions.
That's
you would
true.
literally only be able to have 2.
I mean, dancing lights, you can concentrate on 3 dancing lights if you want to. If you choose to concentrate on a spell for longer than 10 minutes, which is 60 rounds, you, first of all, lose the spell. It becomes dismissed, which means it doesn't exist anymore, and you become fatigued. That having been said, a lot of spells already have built-in limits, so instead of just saying concentration, they're going to say concentration up to 1 minute, or concentration up to 10 minutes. So you can't you couldn't mechanically get into the fatigued state with those spells even if you wanted to for whatever reason. There are a couple spells that don't. Like Flaming Sphere is a good example, but if you're concentrating on Flaming Sphere for 10 minutes, that fight's not going your way. You're probably dead.
Walk through the dungeon just with a, says I can concentrate unlimited. You're like, okay, well, 10 minutes later,
you have to pass out. Your concentration will also end if you take damage equal to your level or greater from a reaction or a free action that is triggered by you using concentration.
And it ends all concentration spells. So if you had 3 dancing lights at the same time.
It seems like it does. That'd be a good thing to like talk about with the community.
All right, when you're down in the comments section letting us know if you want us to cover the 43 different conditions, also hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so the subscribe button does something, and then head over to Twitter and talk to us. You can talk to me on Twitter at IndigoQT.
And I'm Krug. You can talk to me at KrugQT on Twitter or at or what am I supposed to say?
Both of us.
Thank you. Or you can talk to both of us at _QueueTimes on Twitter or at QueueTimes on Instagram.
We've been GameGorgon. We'll see you later.